Hello everyone, this is Kashif Kamran and I welcome you all to a very interesting session on Audit and Assurance, Exam Tips and Techniques. Now with the December exams just around the corner, it is a very important time to discuss some of the fundamental exam tips and techniques which might increase your chances of success in the upcoming exams in December 2020. Now, when we look at the AA paper, the very first thing all of you should understand is the structure of the paper. And then the more important thing after the structure of the paper is how you allocate yourself between the section A of the paper and the section B of the paper. And followed by that, what are tips and techniques of section A and then the section B. So in this very short session today, I will be focusing on the tips and techniques which will definitely increase your chances of success in the upcoming AA exams. We know the passing rates for AA are very low, and in order to pass this exam, you need to have the right tips and techniques which will boost your confidence and boost your chances of success in the exams. So let's start on with the journey of the AA exam tips and techniques. Now, in this session today, I will be using the Word file as my basic whiteboard, and I will be discussing few very important things with all of you today in terms of guiding you with the best of tips and techniques for AA. And I will be sharing this whiteboard used during the session with all of you so you can benefit with the tips and techniques by taking a printout of this file. So let's start on with the journey. Now, first of all, with less than a week remaining for your AA exams, how you should be taking confidence on the AA paper, or how you should be taking a control on the AA paper. Now, first of all, you all must be familiar with the paper and the format of the paper, and I just want to spend a quick 2 to 3 minutes on that. You all know that the AA paper consists of two sections, right? One being the section A and the other being the section B. Now, in the section A, you have the OT cases, and in the section B, you have the constructed response questions. Now, when you look at the OT cases in the first section, the section A, we know these OT cases are total of 30 marks. And when you look at the division of these 30 marks, there are basically 3 OT cases. And each of the OT case is worth, there are 3 OT cases, right? And in a cumulative, these 3 OT cases are worth 30 marks. So that means each OT case is worth 10 marks. Now, in every OT case you get in the first section, each OT case consists of 5 multiple choice questions. So each OT case has 5 questions in each OT case. So when you look at one OT case, which I will just be showing you, one OT case is followed by 5 questions, and you have to pick and choose the right answer from the options given. Now, you need to remember one very important tip and technique here is that when you're looking at these 5 questions in each OT cases, there might be 2 questions in each OT case which might test your knowledge around the subject matter, around the subject. Now, for example, there is an OT case on audit risk. Now, out of the 5 questions under the OT case, there might be 2 questions which might be testing your knowledge of audit risk, like the definition of audit risk, or like the definition of inherent risk, or like the concept of controlled risk. And the remaining 3 questions will be linked with the case study. So there are 5 questions under each OT case, And out of the 5 questions, normally what we see is like 3 questions linked with the case study, and on average 2 questions purely testing your knowledge of the subject matter. So you need to be well prepared, right? Now that means when you're looking at the OT cases in exam, which are worth 30 marks, and for the OT case, you need to have the depth of the syllabus. Because if you have not read the book properly, or you have not read the examining team article properly, you will not have the knowledge to uh, pick and choose the right answer. Now, those OT questions, which are purely based on the OT case, you need to react by reading the case study. But those OT questions, which are purely on knowledge, you can only take the right answer if you know the knowledge of the subject matter. So you need to remember that there are 3 OT cases, and each OT case has 5 questions. Out of the 5 questions, there might be 3 questions which are purely linked to the case study, and there might be 2 questions which are purely testing your knowledge of the subject area, right? So 3 OT cases, and every OT case has 5 questions. So you have total of 15 questions, and every question is worth 2 marks. So that's 15 multiplied by 2, you get your 30 marks. Now, in terms of the depth of the syllabus, you should have covered the entire syllabus, because you are never sure on which syllabus area your examiner will give you the OT cases. You should be very good on the core syllabus areas, like you should be very good on ethics. You should be very good on audit risk. You should be very good on plannings, the fundamental of planning. You should be very good about your audit procedures, be it the substantive procedures or the test of control procedures. You should be very good on going concern. You should be very good on the representation letter. You should be very good on the events after the balance sheet date. And you should be very good on the audit report, because these are very fundamental areas. These are known as core areas of your AA paper. So if you're good on the core areas, your survival rate increases. But you cannot just ignore the minor areas of your syllabus. That means you should have gone over the book reading. You should have gone reading chapter by chapter your entire book, or at least you had read all the articles which are available on the website for AA. So you should have the depth of syllabus. Now, the final thing before I show you the OT case and try to drill something out of the OT case is the time. How much time you should be allocating to section A. Ideally, if you go by the rules of 1 minute and 80 seconds per mark, and you go by that affirmative rule, you have ideally 56 minutes. So if I just round that off, so you have 1 hour 1 hour to attempt the section A. So you should go very, very carefully. 1 hour is a very good time, and you have 3 OT cases. That means to every OT case, you can give 20 minutes. Be relaxed, be calm, no need to be in panic. A lot of time, students are in so much panic with the first 30 marks that they spoil their first 30 marks. You should give a proper time. You should read the case. You should look at the options given. Choose the best option. Don't just be in panic of ticking and getting over. A lot of time, I've seen students who attempt the section A worth 30 marks in just 30 minutes, or in just less than 30 minutes. You cannot do that, because if you're going that way, there is a significant chance you might have ticked the wrong answer. So you have plenty of time. You have 1 hour. You can give 20 minutes approximately to every OT case and solve it carefully. And that will increase your chances of taking very good marks out of 30. So if you can gain like 25 marks out of 30, you're already gaining your confidence towards the success. So the more you gain from the 30 marks, the better you are. Because the 30 marks OT case is literally a bonus. And if you can really apply the time to it, you are gaining confidence of gaining more marks out of the section A. So please don't impair the section A. Don't just be in a panic in section A. You have a proper time. You have a reasonable time. Give that to section A. Now I'll just be showing you a real section A, and I'll just be showing you a real OT case to give you a better application of what I just told you in the last 5 to 6 minutes. Now, when you move from section A and you come to the section B, which are constructed response questions, we know that constructed response questions consist of 3 questions, right? One of the question 1 in the constructed response area is worth 30 marks. And the other 2 questions, the question 2 and the question 3, is worth 20 marks each. Right? So that's how the constructed responses look like. Now, these are proper questions, right? These are questions where you need to write a proper answer. Now, we know these questions, which comes in the constructed response areas, comes from the core syllabus areas. You have a 30 marks case study followed by the requirements ABC, perhaps. You have a 20 marks case study followed by requirements ABC, and you have question number 3 with a 20 marks case study, again followed by requirements A, B, C, or A, B. Now, you need to read each requirement carefully, and I'll just be demonstrating that once I look at a past paper. But when you look at these 3 questions, they are set around the core syllabus area. And you should be very good on the core syllabus areas. Now, if you've seen the past papers and you've practiced the plenty of past papers, you must have seen that when you look at these questions, they are set around planning and risk assessment. Planning and risk assessment. Audit risk is a very favorite topic, which comes repetitively in these constructed response areas, where the examiner asks you to explain the audit risk, and the response to audit risk is a very favorite area. So audit risk is one very important area in this constructed response section. Secondly, ethics, where the examiner asks you to identify the threats and the safeguards to objectivity, is another very favorite area. Questions on weaknesses in the internal control systems, weaknesses in internal control system, and the recommendations on how to overcome the weaknesses, even the test of controls is another very important question which falls in the constructed response area. Then substantive procedures. Examiner do ask you to perform substantive procedures on different situations in the constructed response area. And then questions around review stage of the audit. Examiner can give you a question on going concern. Examiner can give you a question on the events after the balance sheet date. Events after the balance sheet date. And finally, the examiner will bring a question or a part of a question on audit report, testing your knowledge about audit report, particularly the knowledge about opinions, particularly the knowledge about the key audit matters, the knowledge about the emphasis of a meta paragraph, etc. So you should be very good on audit report. So section B, because you've already given 1 hour to section A, that means for section B, the time you are left with is 2 hours, right? So you have 2 hours, that's like 120 minutes. And you have 120 minutes of going through the section B of the paper. So that's good enough time, right? So you can break these 120 minutes into 30 marks, 20 marks, and 20 marks. So you can find the time, how much time you should be giving to the 30 marks, and then to the 20, and then to the 20. So you can find the split of the marks, but you have 120 minutes, right? So you have to give proper time. You cannot just be in rush. You cannot just be in panic. You need to practice. 7th of December, you have your exam, right? So you have to practice at least one exam paper in time management. Keep a clock with you, keep a watch with you, set a time for section A, set a time for section B, and see how much you manage to write within the stipulated time. The more, the better. But you cannot just compromise one question over the other. You cannot give overtime to question number 1 for 30 marks. You cannot say, oh, I'll spend 1 hour on the question number 1 for 30 marks and I'll ignore the others. No, you have to give time to every question. When the time ends for one question, put a full stop and start the next one. If the time ends for that question and if that is incomplete, put a full stop, start the next one. You cannot just overrun time on one question. A lot of times students do that. They overrun time on one question, and that compromises the quality of your overall progress and performance in the double A exams. So if you come out of the exam hall with one question unattempted, that is a big risk of failure, right? So try to give time to every question, but where the time ends for that question, rather than completing that question, put a full stop. Right over there, time ends and starts the next question. That will give a very good image to your assessor that the student was going within the time management, and you put a full stop and you mark time ends here and you start the next question. So you're giving a very good message to the assessor that my time run out here and I started my next question. So that is how you should be going about things within the section A and section B, right? And please remember that the core syllabus areas should be very strong for section A and for section B, right? But apart from that, you cannot ignore knowledge. You cannot ignore reading the book, which is very, very important. Now, this is one aspect, right, of the double A paper. Now, if I move away from the paper and focus on tips and techniques within section A and B, and I put a question in front of you, and we discuss more about the marking scheme, more about structuring the question and answer, more about how you read things up in the exam paper. So let's be more focal on that, right? Okay, now, if I just put a recent question paper in front of you, you can see that in front of your screen. This is a recent one from March, June 19 exams. It's just as an illustration. And when you look at the exam paper, and you look at your section A, right? So we were just discussing that the section A consists of 15 questions, which are compulsory and must be attempted, right? 15 questions. Now, each of the 5 questions pertains to one OT case. So one OT case and you have 5 questions. Another OT case, you have 5 questions. Another OT case, you have 5 questions. So that makes in all the 15. Now, see over here, the examiner is carefully marking this. Each question is worth 2 marks, right? So we have in total 15 questions, multiplied by 2, we get 30 marks. Now, this is the first. The following scenario relates to question 1 to 5. So we have the first OT case, and the first OT case have 5 questions. Then you will have the second OT case and the 5 questions. And you have the third OT case and the 5 questions. Now see, this is the case study. Examiner has given you a short case, and it's telling you about some ethical issues in the very first case. There is a tree company. There is a push company. And the examiner is telling you some ethical threats and problems relating to tree company and push company as an audit firm. And then there is a plant company. And then there is a weed company. And the examiner has given you a case. You will read this case. Now, for every OT case, you have 20 minutes, right? So you can spend a good enough time on reading the case, right? Suppose if the case is a bit bigger, you might take 7 to 8 minutes in reading the case and to understand the case and to mark important things from the case study. And then you can have roughly 10 minutes or a slight more than 10 minutes to answer the 5 questions given under the OT case. But reading the case is very, very important. And a careful reading of the case is very, very important. A lot of time, students are in a rush when they're reading a case. Now, see, this is not a very short case. You have a tree company. You need to identify carefully the proper points. from the tree company. Your annotation is very important. Your highlighting is very important. So the more you highlight, the better for you. So spend time on tree company, spend time on bush company, spend time on plant company, spend time on weed company, and identify what is the problems in all of these companies. And after spending 7 to 8 minutes or approximately 10 minutes on this, you have another 10 minutes or more than that on answering the 5 questions. Now you have the first question. Now, the first question is very much particular about tree company. So you will recall what you read in the tree company, and you will try to take the right answer pertaining to the tree company. The question number 1. Then you go to the second question. The second question is about bush company. So you will think about what you annotated, what you identified in bush company, and try to answer the relevant answer pertaining to bush company. The third question is about plant company. So you will answer the question about plant. The fourth question, again, is the plant company. So you will again refer to the scenario you read about the plant company in order to answer the question in a proper manner. And then the final question is about weed company. So over here, because the examiner has given you so many companies, the examiner almost pick one question on one company. Only for plant company, the examiner kept 2. So in this case, the examiner didn't tested any knowledge. All the 5 questions were on the case study because the case study was very productive. The case study was very big, and there were so many companies in the case study. So the examiner utilized all the case study in completing the 5 questions under the OT case. So you should spend a good 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you will have confidence that you have answered the questions in a reasonable manner, and you might get the cent% scoring. In the same way, you go to the case number 2. Now, the following scenario relates with the question 6 to 10. Now, this is the second OT case, and you have another 5 questions which are running from 6 to 10 now. Now, you read a case here. Again, in this case, the examiner is telling us about some companies here. Oxford company, the pool company, the bath company. And then under that, the examiner is giving us the questions, right? So you have a lot of questions coming under it: 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. You answer it, you get to the next case study. The following scenario relates to the 11 to 15. And you read the case again carefully, spending 8 to 10 minutes. And then you have questions 11 to 15. Now, look at this first question. Which of the following would form part of the auditor's overall review of the financial statement? Now, when the auditor is performing an overall review of the financial statement, which of the following would form part of it? Now, this is just testing your knowledge. This is nothing linked to a case study. This is just testing your knowledge about which of the following would form part of the auditor's overall review of the financial statement, right? Not the audit of the financial statement, an overall review of the financial statement, right? And you have to choose the right answers. Either it's A, B, C, or D, but it's testing your knowledge about what you know about review of the financial statement. Then you have the next question, 12, and it's asking you something about analytical procedures and how you apply the analytical procedures on trade receivables and so on and so forth. Then you have the next question about something relating to the case, because it's asking about the revaluation of the head office. So the revaluation of the head office might be given in the case study. So again, the end conclusion is that out of the 15 questions you have in the OT cases, you might get some questions which is just testing your knowledge. And there might be questions putting emphasis on the case study. So majority of the questions, approximately 80 to 90% of the questions are focused on the case. Yes, there might be 5 to 10% questions in total, which might be on knowledge. And that vary from exam setting to exam setting. So in one exam setting, you might find like 2 to 3 questions out of the 15 testing your knowledge. In a certain exam setting, you might not even find one of them, and all 15 questions are just on the case study. But the rule of thumb is read the case carefully. Try to spend good enough time. So when you have 60 minutes, you can spend 10 minutes on reading the case and 10 minutes on solving the questions. That's good enough. That even means if you have 10 minutes to answer the questions, you have 5 questions. That means for every question, you're giving 2 minutes. That's good enough. In 2 minutes, you can pick up the right answer. So if you plan the time carefully, you will have good number of marks out of 30. That is the important rule of thumb here, right? Now moving away from this section, which is the section A, and you complete that off and you come to the section B, where you have the constructed response questions, where I just guided you that one of the question is worth 30, then 20, then 20, and you start things well. Now, this is an area where the examiner will ask you questions in a very proper manner, and you need to respond to them. And the problem here is that the students don't read the question or break the question or split the question, and they make mess of it. So the very important rule, particularly when you're reading the constructed response area, if I can just guide you on that. The constructed response section, how you go about it. Now, when you look at the constructed response section, the first very important thing is to read the requirement carefully. You need to split the requirement. You need to be very careful about the comma. Be careful about comma or the and, because a lot of time the students don't read the and carefully. So if the examiner is using a comma, be very careful. If the examiner is saying and, be very careful, because that's splitting the requirement. So you need to know how many things is the examiner asking me. Is the examiner just asking me one thing? Or is the examiner asking me 2 things, 3 things? Because with every comma, the requirement will break. Or with every and, the requirement will break. And the students are not very concerned about it in the exam pressure. Now, if I just go back, look at this requirement. It says for each of the 2 methods. That means the 2 methods means narrative notes and the next method questionnaire. So for each of the 2 methods, describe the method for documenting the internal control system. So you need to describe what is a narrative note. You need to describe what is a questionnaire. So you need to describe the method, number 1. And then you can see this and here. And you need to explain the advantage for using this method. Advantage. So for narrative note, I should first describe what narrative notes are, and then I should explain the advantage of a narrative note, not disadvantage, right? Then for a questionnaire, I should describe the advantage. Sorry, I should describe what questionnaires are, and then I should explain the advantage of the questionnaire. Now see how many marks I have? I just have 4 marks. And the examiner is saying the marks are equally split between each part. Now I have narrative notes and I have a questionnaire, and the marks are 4. So that's very easy, right? So if I look at this question, for example, I would be very careful. I have narrative notes and I have the questionnaires. So I'll just keep 2 marks for narrative notes out of the 4, and I'll keep 2 marks for the questionnaire out of the 4. Now I know for 2 marks, I need to do 2 things. Number 1, I need to describe it, what they are. And number 2, I need to write an advantage. Now that logically means I know the marking scheme. I have 1 mark for describing what narrative notes are, and I have 1 mark for writing an advantage. So same goes with questionnaire. So if you read the requirement carefully, you split the requirement carefully, you know the marking scheme, you know the split of the marking scheme, you're giving a wonderful answer to your assessor. So the first thing, read the requirement carefully and then identify the marking scheme. Identify the marking scheme before you start writing the answer. Before you start writing the answer. That's how you go down with it, right? Prefer using headings. Use headings where possible, because in a theoretical paper like AA, the headings are incorrigible unless and until your examiner tells you to put something in a table form. Now, you can put a heading of narrative notes, and you put the heading of a questionnaire, at least 2 headings, and under that you're putting 1 paragraph for describing, and you're putting 1 paragraph for an advantage. So you can give 2 paragraphs under the narrative notes, right? Use headings where possible and break the paragraphs. Break the paragraphs. A lot of times students write very lengthy paragraphs. Now, when you describe, the describe could just be like 2 to 3 sentences max. Max 2 to 3 sentences. I'm not saying 2 to 3 lines. I'm saying 2 to 3 sentences. A sentence means where you put a full stop, right? So 2 to 3 sentences max, you put describe. Then you change the line. You will not start immediately where the describe ends. A lot of time where the student ends the describe, they start writing the advantage. Break, come to the next line, come to the next paragraph. So start the advantage from the next para, from a new para. So examiner knows, okay, this is the describe and this is the advantage. You can also put the headings, but don't just merge the describe and the advantage together. Keep 1 para for describe and 1 para for advantage. And the ideal length of a para should be not 1 para. 1 para should not be 1 para should not be more than 3 to 4 sentences long. 3 to 4 sentences long. Don't write a para longer than 3 to 4 sentences. Break. So if you're developing a point, 1 point for 1 mark can be developed in like 2 to 3 sentences or 3 to 4 sentences, depends upon the situation. But an ideal length of even a 1 mark answer or even a 2 mark answer is that you complete your point, you develop your point, you explain your point, you justify your point within a scope of 2 to 3 sentences or 3 to 4 sentences max, and you break. So don't just make a 6 sentences paragraph, 8 sentences paragraph, because that looks too lengthy even for the assessor to read and mark. So make things better, presentable, because presentation counts a lot in a theoretical paper, right? So improve your presentation a lot. So use headings, break the paragraphs. Okay, that's one. Let's move back. Okay, then you have a case study, right? You have a case, and this case goes down, and the examiner comes with another requirement. In this case, the examiner says, in respect of the internal controls of the Faurecia company. Now, in terms of the internal controls of the Faurecia company, you need to identify and explain 6 deficiencies. So you need to identify and explain 6 deficiencies. So examiner is already giving you the number 6. So that means no 7, no 8, just 6 deficiencies to be identified from the internal controls of Faurecia. Recommend a control to address the deficiency. So you need to recommend a control to address the deficiency, number 2. And number 3, describe a test of controls the external auditor should perform to assess if the controls, if implemented, is operating effectively. So what if implemented? So in the number 2, you are recommending the controls, right? Over here, recommend a control. So in the number 3, you are assuming that if the management implements the control you recommended, what test of controls will you perform on the control to assure that it's operating effectively? So in the number 3, you are assuming that whatever you recommended to management in the number 2 has been implemented. So if implemented by the management, what test of control will you perform to assure that the controls are operating effectively, right? Now, the examiner is telling that you have to put this in a form of a 3-column table. So your answer should be in a 3 columns. Prepare answer using 3 columns. Headed, control deficiency, control recommendation, and a test of control. So examiner is also telling you the headings to put. 3 columns. Control deficiency, heading, control recommendation, heading, and a test of control as a heading. You cannot just even change the headings because the examiner is telling you I need these 3 headings in a 3 column. So in the first column, in the next question, in the next example, sorry, you put the 3 columns, right? So we have 3 columns like this. In the first column, we need to put the control deficiency. That was what the examiner was telling us. Then the examiner was saying in the second column, put control recommendation. And in the third column, put test of control. So we have 3 headings. And how many deficiencies we need to write? 6. So 1, 2, we have to insert 2 more here. Obviously, in the exam, you can insert the table. At times, the examiner has given you a table itself to answer in the response section of your computer-based exams. Okay, just let's take it on the next page. Now you have 6 rows coming under it, right? Now, you need to work on a control deficiency. And for every control deficiency, you need to tell a recommendation and you need to tell a test of control. Now, you need to understand one thing. You have total of 18 marks, which is very simple split here. 18 marks, and you need to work on 6 in total. So that means you have 3 marks per deficiency. You have 3 marks per deficiency. Now, how you're breaking these 3 marks? 1 mark you have for the deficiency, number 1. Then this 1 mark you have for recommendation of the deficiency. And then you have 1 mark for the test of control, assuming that the management has implemented your recommendation. So you put the deficiency, you put the recommendation, you put a test of control, you get 3 marks. Then you come on the next, another 3 marks, and next 3, and next 3, total 18. So in 18 marks, you need to work on 6, right? So that means you have 3 marks per deficiency. That includes the deficiency, that includes the recommendation, that includes the test of control. Or rather, let's make it this way. You have 3 marks per issue. Now that issue is a deficiency, a recommendation, and a test of control. So you fill the column 1 with a deficiency, you fill it with recommendation, you fill it with test of control, right? And in all, you take your 3 marks, 1 per column. So the control deficiency is 1 mark, recommendation is 1 mark, and the test of control is 1 mark. So once you complete 1 issue, 1 problem, you get in total the 3 marks. So you write 6 and you take 18 marks. Now, the problem with students is that when the examiner says that you need to identify and explain the deficiency, they're very good on identifying the deficiency. Right now, the examiner is saying identify and explain the deficiency. Right now, the students are so good on identifying, they will find the problem. Identify, good, no issues. You all are capable of identifying the problem. So you will identify from the case the problem. But the problem is with explain. This is so bad. This is so bad with student. Now, what you should do to explain? Now, when you identify the deficiency, that means you've already took half a mark. But you then need to explain why it is a deficiency. So your focus should be why it is a deficiency. Why it is a deficiency? And possibly thinking about what it is, why it is a deficiency and its implication on the organization. And you score your 1 mark. Let me illustrate you. For example, you're reading a case, which the case says there is no internal audit department. Or the case says there is no physical security. There is no physical security at the warehouse. Something like that. Now, when you're reading the case and you're solving, you identify, right? There is no physical security. Now, when you're answering your question, there is no physical security at the warehouse, for example. Now see how would I develop my point. I will take it above here and I'll say there is no physical security at the warehouse. And I identified it, so straight away I get 0.5 marks. But now I need to explain why it is a deficiency. So I'll say there is no physical security at the warehouse, which increases the risk of theft of inventory items, which increases the risk of theft of inventory items from the warehouse, which can cause substantial losses, which can cause losses to the business. And I wrap up my point. So there is no physical security, but the examiner is more interested to know why it is a weakness. It is a weakness because it increases the risk of theft of inventory items from the warehouse, which can cause losses. So the moment you write this, you are taking your next 0.5 marks. And then obviously, once you wrote the deficiency, so you are taking your 0.5 marks for identifying right here. And you're taking another 0.5 marks for explaining why it is a deficiency. So remember the rule, right? Then if you want to gain a mark on a deficiency, what rule you have to follow? You need to follow a rule of telling why it is a deficiency or possibly the implication to the organization. So I wrote why a risk of theft, and the possible implication is it can cause losses to business. So I'm taking my 0.5 marks. But see how much I wrote? Just like a sentence. Now you come to the recommendation. Now, whenever you're writing a recommendation, what you need to do? You need to be very specific. Just like a sentence, a quick sentence. There is no physical security at the warehouse, so just the opposite of that, and a quick one sentence answer. The company should ensure that physical security is put in place at the warehouse. At the warehouse. Now you just put the recommendation that there should be physical security. Now your recommendation cannot be dragged, right? Because your recommendation should be just a sentence, but you're giving a recommendation that if they don't have a physical security, they should have it. So see, it's just a sentence giving me 1 mark. So you're just recommending. Recommending means a bullet, a sentence. Now, assuming that the management puts the physical security in place, assuming that the management puts the physical security in place, the examiner is saying recommend a test of control, assuming that the security has been put in place. Now, what am I assuming? I'm assuming that the security is there now because I recommended it, and now I need to perform the test of control. So how would I assure that the physical security is working properly? So I will observe the warehouse by visiting, observe the warehouse by visiting to ensure that the physical security is present. The physical security is present. So it's a physical security, right? So I can just visit the warehouse at any time of the day just to ensure that the physical security was present there. So observe the warehouse by visiting to ensure that the physical security was present. By visiting anytime during the day, a surprise visit to ensure that the physical security was working. So my test of control becomes observe. So observe becomes my test of control. So you need to start a test of control with a verb, observe, to demonstrate you're doing something. Test of control means auditor is testing something. So when you're testing something, that should start with an action verb. So observe means I'm testing. How am I testing? Observing. So by observing, I'm testing that the physical security is present. So normally your test of control is like a sentence for 1 mark. Now you need to remember one very important rule here. that when writing a test of control, you need to ensure that the test starts with an action verb, with an action verb. You cannot have a test without an action verb. Example, observe. Example, reperform. These are all action verbs, right? Example, inspect. These are all action verbs, right? So I need to start reperform. Okay. I need to have an action verb, right? Because that demonstrate I'm testing something. How I test something? I inspected it. How I tested something? Did I reperformed it? How I tested something? Did I observed it? And the list goes on, right? Etc. So test starts with an action verb, right? And when you're testing something, there has to be a reason for a test, a purpose for a test, a purpose for a test to ensure that the physical security is present. See this, ensure, ensure. So the moment I write ensure, that's my purpose. Why am I observing? Why am I observing? So you start the test with an action and you end the test with the reason. Why am I testing? Ask yourself a question in the exam paper. Why am I testing? What's the reason? What's the purpose? So what is the definition of a good test of control? A good test of control is equal to an action verb followed by a reason for the test, and you take your 1 mark. So you need to be very particular about your test of control, right? So this is how you're taking up your marks in this case. So read the requirement carefully, break the requirement carefully, follow the instruction. The examiner was saying you have to do this in 3 columns, and examiner was giving you the headings of the column. And that's how you go down. Now, just few more examples in this situation. There is another requirement, C. It says describe the substantive procedures the auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in respect of the Pharesia Company year-end accrual for the employment tax payable. So you need to perform procedures on the year-end accrual for the employment tax payable for 4 marks. Now, procedures are simple, right? Year-end accruals, procedures. Remember a rule here. Now, whenever in the AA paper you're making a substantive procedures, you have to follow some rules. First of all, whenever the examiner gives you a substantive procedure, you will have a subject matter, right, to make a substantive procedure. Just like in this case, you will have a subject matter given. Now, in this case, the subject matter given is the year-end accrual of the employment tax payable, right? So there is an employment tax payable year-end accrual. Examiner after that will tell you the marks. The marks are 4. So you are very sure that every procedure is worth 1 mark in exam. So you have 4 marks. You divide that by 1 mark. So is equal to you're writing 4 substantive procedures. Now, before I demonstrate that, when you're writing a 4 substantive procedures, you need to remember what is a good substantive procedure. A good substantive procedure in the exam is the one which has an action, which has a source, which has a purpose, right? And it's case specific if possible, because examiner will give you a short case followed by substantive procedures, right? So action. You cannot just start writing a procedure without a verb. Procedure can't be without verb, like discuss, like inspect, like recalculate, etc. Just like test of control, right? You cannot start it without a verb. So how you demonstrate you're doing something. Procedure means you're doing something, right? So how you demonstrate you're doing something? Through an action. Source. When you're writing a procedure, obviously the auditor is performing a procedure on a source. For example, if I say discuss with management, then management is the source. With whom am I discussing? Management. If I say recalculate, the employment tax payable, then what am I recalculating? I am recalculating the employment tax payable. So the employment tax payable becomes my source. So discuss with management. Management is my source. I'm discussing with management. I'm recalculating what? A very particular thing. That very particular thing becomes my source. If I say inspect, if I say, sorry, just 1 minute. If I say inspect the board minutes, then board minutes becomes my source. So there can be source rights. If I say correspond with the lawyer, then lawyer becomes my source. So source is something on which you're working on. Now, source can be a paper, source can be a person, source can be a third party, source can be the management, source, the one on whom you're applying the procedure. So you should have a source. Purpose. Why am I performing it? Why am I performing it? Ask this question to yourself. Why am I performing it? What's the reason? The reason becomes the source. Why are you recalculating the employment tax? To ensure it's accurate. The accuracy becomes its purpose. And case specific. If identified from the case given by examiner, it's better than rote-learn procedure. So please remember that when you are making a good substantive procedure, it should come out of the case study. Let me demonstrate that for you in just like a minute. Over here, examiner has given us a very short case right here above the C requirement. If I can just copy that, see this case. It's just in like 3 lines, a small case followed by a 4 marks answer. Okay, I just copy the case here from the examiner paper just to demonstrate something. See, this is the case which I just copy pasted from the examiner question. And I follow my rules, which I just taught you. Okay, I'll read the case. Suppose I'm a student. I'm sitting in the exam hall and I have to work on 4 substantive procedures looking at the very small case given by the examiner. Faurecia company deducts employment taxes from its employee wages and salaries on a monthly basis. So they do deduct employment taxes from its employee wages on a monthly basis and pay these to the local tax authorities in the following month. So they deduct and they pay in the next month. So that is why they have an accrual. So at the year end, for example, if the company's year end is December, so whatever they deduct in December, they will have an accrual in December, which they will be paying in Jan. Okay. At the year end, the financial statement will contain an accrual for employment tax payable, right? So I need to ensure the accuracy of that accrual for the month of, for example, December, if the year end is December. So I need to assure that the accrual recognized in the financial statement for the year end is accurate, and the management will pay that in January the next year. So I can check the subsequent payment of the accrual the next month. So at the year end, there is an accrual in the financial statement, and month later, the next month, it will be paid off. So I can check the subsequent payment of the accrual, and I can check the subsequent payment to the tax authorities. Now, a couple of things I need to check, right? First of all, I need to check the accrual for the employment tax payable, that it has been in the financial statement. I need to check that the management deduct employment taxes and the rate of the employment taxes are as per the legislation. The management is not under recording the tax or the tax rate is not wrong. I need to assure the accuracy of the tax rate, so on and so forth. Now, there are a couple of things from the case study which I need to check. If I can just make a brainstorming first, brainstorming, and then I react. My first brainstorming would be, deducts the employment taxes. So I just need to ask myself as a student in the exam hall that deducts the employment taxes, is the tax rate accurate? Is there any problem with the tax rate? I need to confirm through my substantive procedure that the tax rate used for deduction from the employment wages and salaries is perfectly correct. Is the tax rate accurate? Number one. Second, uh, I can just assure the trend of the previous deductions, trends of the previous deductions on monthly basis. I can just have a trend analysis of the previous deductions in the month of November, October, September, August, just to compare that with the last month, December, just to ensure that it is as per the trend. If the number of employees have not changed, their salary structure has not changed, ideally, it should reflect the same trend. What if in the last 3 months, on average, the accruals have been like 100, and in December, the accrual only became 50? It also indicates that the management might be understating accruals at the year end, just to ensure that their profits are boosted. So I just need to pick up the trend because it is on a monthly basis. So if there is no change in the number of employees, there is no change in the salary, it should follow a systematic trend. So I can just do a trend analysis to confirm that there are no unusual fluctuation in the year-end accrual. So trend of the previous deductions on a monthly basis versus the year-end accrual versus the year-end accrual for 1 month, right? Accrual. Number three, I would be concerned about the accrual recognized by the management in the financial statement. Accrual recognized by management in the financial statement for the year end, for the last month of the year, for the last month of the year, which they will pay the next year. So management must have done their own working. And finally, I can have a recalculation of the amount the management determined, the recalculation of the accrual myself, just to ensure it's accurate. So whenever you are writing procedures, first please have a brainstorming, because the brainstorming can help you down with at least thinking about some points which can later be converted into writing very good procedures. Now, see, if I look at my questions, I would be concerned about the accuracy of the tax rate. I would be concerned about the previous comparisons of previous months accruals, just to ensure that the year-end accrual in December is the same as the previous month. If there is unusual fluctuations, I will be discussing with management the reason why the accrual this time is high or low. I will look at the working of the management for accruals, just to ensure that the management working on accrual seems perfect, and I can then recalculate the accrual myself, just to ensure that my working matches with the management working, and that's how things goes up with 4 marks. So I start with my first procedure in exam paper by something like that. I should have an action, I should have a source, I should have a purpose, right? So my first procedure would be, number one, inspect the employment tax rate, inspect the employment tax rate, inspect the employment tax rate used by the management to determine accrual, inspect the employment tax rate used by the management to determine accrual to ensure that the tax rate is updated and as per legislation. So what is the reason? What is the reason I'm inspecting the tax rate? Just to ensure that the tax rate is not outdated, It's updated, and it's the one as per the legislation. There is no non-compliance with the tax laws. So inspect is my action. Uh, Inspect what? What am I inspecting? Employment tax rate. So the employment tax rate becomes my source. Why am I inspecting the tax rate? To ensure. So the moment I write to ensure, that becomes my purpose. Three different colors, right? The yellow is the action, the blue is the source, the green is the purpose. Three things in my procedure, and I'll get my full 1 mark. Action, source, purpose. And was it from the case study? Because the case study was telling me that the company deducts tax as per the tax legislations. So I should need to confirm that. My procedure is not a rote learn procedure from the BVP Kaplan book. It was coming out of the case study. So if you have a yellow, if you have a blue, if you have a green in your procedure, it's 1 mark. The next one, trends. Analyze. Analyze the trends of accruals. Analyze the trends of accruals from in the previous months. In the previous months, and compare that with the year-end accrual, to confirm there is, to confirm whether there is any significant, fluctuations or not. So I just need to ensure that if the management is recognizing the accrual for December, what has been the trend in November, October, September, August? Is there any unusual elements in December which was not there in November? In November, I recognized an accrual of 100, and in December, I'm recognizing an accrual of 50. Why? So I can find an unusualness, right, if possible, through analyzing. So analyze becomes my yellow procedure. Trends of the accrual becomes my subject matter, blue. And why am I doing it? To confirm whether there is any fluctuation or not. So that becomes my green. So again, I have the three things, making it a 1 mark procedure. Again, it's not out of the case study. Then I can just recalculate the year-end accrual to confirm it's accurate. It's to confirm it's accurate as per the working of the management. It's accurate as per the working of the management and amount recognized in the financial statement. So my recalculated amount should tally, right? So this becomes one more procedure. So I recalculated the year-end accrual because it was an amount. I can recalculate it. So recalculate becomes my procedure. Recalculate becomes my action. Year-end accrual becomes my subject matter, which is the source basically in the blue. And to confirm it's accurate becomes my green, my purpose, 1 mark. And the final 1 mark procedure I will be making is the post year-end clearance. Now, I had an accrual in December, which the management must have paid to the tax authorities in January. So I can inspect the post year-end payment of the accrual to tax authorities to confirm that indeed the payment was made. So I will inspect, again yellow, the post year-end payment, or the subsequent payment sounds better. Inspect the subsequent payment from the bank statement or the cash book. From the bank statement, subsequent payment from the bank statement becomes my source of the accrual to the tax authorities to confirm that indeed the payment was made, right? So that becomes my reason, 1 mark. So see, I made 4 procedures from the case study. I was not worried about the BPB book or the Kaplan book. It's just about your common sense. If you know a good procedure is equal to A, action, S, source, P, purpose, plus it should be case specific. You read the case, you brainstorm the case, you identify the points, and you convert them. Now, see, I didn't break my rule. Every procedure starts with a verb, inspect. Number 2 starts with analyze. Number 3 starts with recalculate. Number 4 starts with inspect. In every procedure, I had a source. A source is a subject matter on which I am performing a procedure. So in the number 1, I was performing procedure on the tax rate. In the number 2, I was performing procedures on the trends. In the number 3, I was performing procedures on the year-end accruals. In the number 4, I was performing procedures on the subsequent payments. And for every procedure, I had a reason to ensure, to confirm. Now that's a good procedure, worth 1 mark. That's so simple. So please ensure you have 6 days, take a procedure, brainstorm it, and convert that to an action, a source, a purpose. The more you practice, the confidence you will gain for your actual exams on the 7th of December. But remember, procedures, whether test of control or whether substantive, are worth 1 mark per in exam. So that's one important thing to remember, right? And in the same order, you go down, you have another question. Again, the examiner says, describe 2 corporate governance weaknesses. So just stick to 2, not 3, not 4, 2. And then you can see, and the break. After the and, the examiner says, provide a recommendation for each weakness. So again, you have total of 4 marks. So that means for every weakness, you have 2 marks. That means a weakness and a recommendation. Again, the examiner is saying use 2 columns. So in one column, you put a weakness like this, weakness. In the next column, you put a recommendation. So 2 columns, one with weakness, one with recommendation. So you write 1 weakness and again justify why it is a weakness, and then you put a crisp recommendation of how to overcome it. So that is how you break this question. Then you get to the next one. Examiner says define and explain the materiality and performance materiality. So you have to define and explain. So you need to elaborate upon what is materiality and what is performance materiality. You have 4 marks. So you have 2 marks for materiality and you have 2 marks for performance materiality. You need to give a crisp definition and then you elaborate on that definition. Then you have a case followed by describe 8 audit risks, not 9, not 10, not 6, 8. And for every audit risk, you need to tell the response to risk. Again, 2 columns. Use 2 columns, examiner is saying, and 1 column should be headed audit risk and 1 column should be headed audit response respectively. You have 16 marks, so that is very clear. When you have 16 marks here, so you're dividing it, 8 audit risk, right? So for every audit risk, you take 1 mark, and for that recommendation of the risk response, this response will give you another 1 mark. So 1 audit risk should be worth 2 marks, right? 1 for the risk, 1 for the response, and you write total of 8. Now, again, when you're writing the audit risk, a lot of time, the problem with the students is, which I need to address on my Word file particularly, when the students are writing audit risk, they're very bad into one thing, which I need to address. Okay, when writing audit risk, just see why the students are bad at. Now, when the examiner says explain the audit risk, again, identify the audit risk, which I believe students are good at. Students are good at, right? Identify the risk. They will pick the risk, definitely. But that will give you 0.5 marks. Identify the risk. But then you have another 0.5 marks where you need to explain the audit risk. Now, what you need to do? Explaining the audit risk. Now, when you're explaining the audit risk, you need to be very particular about the impact the audit risk has on financial statements. I have seen so many times that the students don't write the proper impact the audit risk has on the financial statement, which is the understatements, under or over statement, or which is perhaps the financial statements could be materially misstated. Now, just for example, the company does not have an internal audit department. Now, this is an audit risk because this is part of the control risk. Now, you need to explain that. So I put my two columns here. In one column, I say audit risk, and in one column, I say the response. Let's find that exact jargon. Auditor's response and audit risk. Okay, auditor's response, is that what the examiner wants from us? So auditor's response and audit risk. Okay, so I'll be writing my audit risk saying the company does not have an internal audit department. The moment I write this, I am taking straight away my 0.5 marks. Now I need to explain why it is an audit risk. The company does not have an internal audit department, comma. The company does not have an internal audit department means that there is no proper monitoring of the internal control systems. There is no proper monitoring of the internal control systems, which might increases the risk of material misstatements in the financial statements. So I cannot just tell there is no proper monitoring of the internal control system, but I need to tell what will happen to the financial statement. If there is no proper monitoring of the internal control system, how will it impact the financial statement? How will it be connected with the financial statement? So there is no proper monitoring, which might increase the risk of material misstatements in the financial statement because there is lack of monitoring. So I need to connect the risk with the financial statement. So when you're explaining the audit risk, please ensure each of your risk connects with the financial statements, then to make a remarkable impact. A risk without impact on a financial statement is useless. An audit risk without an impact on the financial statement is useless. Now, auditor's response. Your auditor response will be, how would you ensure it's mitigated? How would you ensure that a procedure you will perform to ensure that in the absence of the internal audit department, how is the company managing the affairs? The company does not have an internal audit department, right? You're not giving a recommendation. You're giving an auditor response that when the auditor goes through the audit, how will he ensure that in the absence of the internal audit department, how is the management managing the affairs? So probably the audit response would be, when you go to the audit, you will discuss with those charged with governance the need of having an internal audit department. So when you go to the audit, your response might be that you might be discussing with the higher management the need of having the internal audit department and the and how things are managed in absence of this department. And you will be discussing with management how you manage things in the absence of this department, and you will also be discussing with them the need of having this department in future. So this might be becoming your response, right, when you go to the audit. So discuss is your response, right, as a procedure when you go to the audit. Now, whenever you're writing an audit risk, you need to be very particular about the audit risk and its impact. Now, this was very journal. Look at another example. For example, the next. If the company does not have an internal audit department, then in that case, I am just saying the financial statements could be materially misstated. But for example, the examiner gives you a very particular situation where the examiner tells you that the research the management undertook a research and development into a new chemical, and spent $50 million on it, which has been capitalized as intangible asset at the year end. The total assets of the company are $400 million. Now, in this case, the management undertook a research and development, whereby they've spent $50 million. Now, that means the $50 million also includes the research cost, and the management has capitalized the entire $50 million as an intangible asset. So that means the management has also capitalized the development cost. Sorry, the management has also capitalized the research cost. Now, I should make my point here. The amount spent on research and development of $50 million. First of all, I'll find the materiality of 50 million because I have been given the total assets of the company. So is 50 million material? So I'll use my calculator and I'll divide the 50 million with 400 million and I'll find the percentage. It's 12.5%. So that's quite material. So the amount spent on research and development of $50 million is 12.5% of the total assets. Finding the materiality where possible is very good, right? The amount spent on research and development of $50 million is 12.5% of the total assets, which is material to the financial statements. I hope you know the rules of finding the materiality on total assets, profit, and revenue. Full stop. You found the materiality, it's material, then you identify the risk. The total amount shouldn't be recognized. The total amount shouldn't be recognized in as intangible assets as only the development cost is capitalized, subject to some conditions, whereas the research cost is expensed out. So you develop your point. Thus, currently, the intangible assets. Now see my impact on the financial statement, and look at my impact of the company does not have an internal audit department because I cannot identify the under and overstatement. So I was very conclusive that there could be risk of material misstatements in the financial statement. But for the research and development cost, I can be very particular. Thus, currently, the intangible assets are overstated because we have capitalized the entire 50 million, whereas the research cost should have been expensed out. Thus, currently, the intangibles are overstated and the operating expenses are understated. So I found my audit risk. My audit risk is thus currently, look at my audit risk. The audit risk cannot be without an impact on the financial statement. If you can identify the account balance, you need to identify the account balance. What is understated, what is overstated. In the case of the internal audit department, I couldn't. So I just say the financial statements could be materially misstated. But in the case of the research and development, I could identify what account balance is over or what account balance is under. So I was very particular. But again, my point of concern is An audit risk without a connection to financial statement is useless. An audit risk without an impact on the financial statement is useless. If you write all things but you miss out the impact, that's useless. So I first told examiner the materiality of the research and development cost because it was possible. Then I tell examiner that as per the accounting rule, only the research cost is to be expensed out and development cost can be capitalized subject to some rules. And in this case, the management has done the wrong accounting treatment, and this is understated and that is overstated, right? Now, when I should be writing my auditor response, that when I go to the audit, I will be discussing, I should take the breakup of the $50 million to confirm how much is the amount spent on research cost. And I should emphasize on the management to adjust the amount. So I should inspect the breakup when I go to the audit, inspect the breakup of $50 million, inspect the breakup of $50 million to identify, to confirm the actual amount spent on research and to ensure it's adjusted from the financial statements. So this is my procedure, right? This is my audit procedure, which I will do when I go to the audit. So my response has to start with an action: inspect, discuss. Again, the same rules, right? Same rules you learn in substantive procedure, ASP. So please ensure when you're writing audit risk, it is such a core topic. When you're writing audit risk, please ensure how you write it. One more guidance on audit risk. There is a very good guidance given by ACCA on audit risk right over here. The examiner tells you very carefully in this approach that how you should write an audit risk in a very proper manner. I'm just copying this link from here and pasting this link on my Word file right over here. So you can just read this for a very good way of writing the audit risk. How to write audit risk in the AA paper. Please ensure that you read this hyperlink. This is wonderful and that can be very good for you. Okay. Now, a few of the last things left. There is another article of the examiner, which is Read the Mind of the Marker. This is such a wonderful article. You can see this right in front of your screen. Again, this tells you that audit risk is an important area and will continue to be examined. And this tells you that for identifying each audit risk, you take half a mark. And for explanation of each risk, you take half a mark, right? And then for the response, you take 1. And the examiner then justify that how you explain. See, to explain the audit risk, you should do this. And to put an audit response, you should do this. So I would prefer that you read this article, this marking scheme article very carefully so that you know how you write the explanation. So please, this is just a small article if you can spend time on it. This is Read the Mind of the AA Marker, and I can share the link of this and the file with you. But this is a wonderful document. See this, Read the Mind of the AA Marker. So if you can just scroll over this in the last 5 days before your exams, and you can just read this in the next 1 to 2 days, so you will probably know the expectations of the examiner, because you need to reduce the gap between you and your examiner. And you should know what your examiner expects from you when he says explain the audit risk, or you should know what your examiner expects from you when he says explain the ethical threat. So this article will do that. You read through the mind of the AA marker, and the more the better. So I'm just leaving you one last thing, which I would recommend here, that the success in the AA paper, right, will only come. Success will only come if you reduce your gap with examiner expectations. Now, you should know the examiner expectations. Will only come if you reduce your gap with examiner expectations. And the only way of doing that is read the mind of marker. Read the mind of marker, the double A. And I would share this document with all of you. Right. Number two, read the mind of marker and the examiner reports of at least last two exams available on the ACCA website. I think you should do this in the next 5 days, because a lot of times students ask, what should we do in these next 5 days? So I think in the next 5 days, you should read the mind of marker and you should read the examiner reports. And if I can just share links with that. If you go to the study resources for AA right here, and in terms of the study resources for AA, under the element of exam techniques, right here, see the exam techniques coming on your page. I can copy this link, exam techniques. Under the exam technique, the very first document is read the mind of the AA marker. You can just click and download. So I'm sharing the link of exam technique page. On the exam technique page, the very first document is read the mind of the marker, right? So read the mind of the marker, I'm sharing the link here, right? So the very first article you'll find on this page is read the mind of the marker. And for the examiner reports, what you should do, you go back to the same page of the AA and you will find over here examining team guidance. So you click on examining team guidance here and you go to the examiner reports, right? Over here, you can see the July 2020 examiner report and the March 2020 and the December 2019. So at least make sure that you read the July 2020 examiner report and you read the March 20. At least two recent examiner reports you should be reading. Two recent examiner reports, right? So that you are capable. So please ensure, first of all, you all know the structure of the paper between section A and section B. You know the time management. You know your syllabus very well. You know the core syllabus very well, which includes ethics, which includes planning and risk assessment, which includes audit procedures, which includes review stage of the audit, which is more about going concern and events after the balance sheet date, which includes audit report. So if you are good on the fundamentals, right, and then you have a very good reading of the book, you should ensure that you spend proper time between section A and section B as guided during the lecture today. Again, this was this lecture took too much time, but again, the emphasis was very important, which might benefit you. You come to section B and you have a proper time in section B as well, which was guided to you. In section B, please read the requirement carefully, understand the format you need to present the answer, ensure you develop your point reasonably well. In terms of audit procedures, be assured that you're writing a case-specific audit procedure rather than a rote-learn audit procedure. Please be very good on your knowledge of audit report. A lot of time, students are confused between material, and pervasive. Students are confused between qualified opinions and adverse opinions. Students are confused between a CAM and an emphasis of a matter paragraph. Please ensure you have a crystal clear knowledge on audit report, because if you have a crystal clear knowledge on audit report, the audit report question is a bonus in the AA paper. You cannot just reduce your marks on that. You need to increase your marks on that. So I wish you all success in your upcoming exams for AA on the 7th of December. But please ensure these last 6 days you spend time on reading the mind of the marker. That's a wonderful document. You read the two recent examiner reports, because that will give you a lot of encouragement. That will identify for you the pitfalls why students fail in the AA paper. It will identify you the weaknesses why students fail in the AA paper. And that if identified, you will not be doing it. So identify the loopholes, identify the pitfalls, identify the weaknesses when you read the examiner reports and the reading the mind of the AA marker. And these two articles, if you read them in the next 48 hours, will be really, really beneficial for you, because this will identify the problems for you. And if you overcome these problems and you don't repeat these problems on the 7th of December, you will be having success. So your next 6 days are crucial. Just fine tune yourself. Just ensure you do one full paper under time management. Please ensure you read the documents where you can meet the expectations of the examiner. Please ensure you revise your techniques. You have a very good command on the marking schemes of the AA paper so that you don't do silly mistakes on the 7th of December. So I wish you success. This is Kashif Kamran signing off from this very important session, AA exam tips and techniques. A lot more to discuss, but again, the time is short. Already spent a bit more time, though I initially planned the session to be just of 30 minutes, but I went beyond that because there was so much to discuss and so much to be guided. So again, best of luck. Have a nice day. I'll be looking forward to your feedback and your post-exam feedback as well. Take care. Goodbye.